So, our first panel, ladies and gentlemen, it's on the current landscape of ED&I within the United Kingdom. So let's tick things off by setting the scenes on what modern Britain looks like. I've mentioned there's 14.6 million ethnic minorities living in this country. Quite a lot. We are very diverse when it comes to languages. Any guesses how many languages we might be speaking in this country? Over 300. So as an agency, we cater for 46 mainstream languages, but across the UK, we speak in more than 300 languages. Brands need to culturally diverse and, of course, ensure that they are targeting appropriately the ethnic minorities. And this is why we are hosting these events, to be able to reintroduce you to the ethnic marketing, to introduce you to the idea of how to reach out to different audiences. And I'm delighted to be joined by an expert in everything ED&I. So Nick is our guest who's joining me on the panel, and Nick has been there and won quite a lot of things. I said I'm only a founder and managing director, but when it comes to introducing Nick, I have got a whole list here of things I can say about this gentleman, because he's been there and done it a lot. Most importantly, Chief Strategy Officer at Oliver, the agency. Also involved in the Black Marketeers. Can you tell us a little more about that to start with?
Yeah, so firstly, thank you for having me along, Thomas. I was saying when my mic was off, never trust anybody that's called an expert. General rule. So the Black Marketers Council is the latest council that was started within the DMA, so the Data Marketing Association. The reason that I went to them about that was I'd written an article for campaign at the time of the Euros called Diversity Goals, and I thought to myself, we should actually do more than just write and talk about this subject. We should actually try and do some kind of tangible change. And the article was all about the fact that I think 1 in 3 black professionals in marketing drop out in the midpoint in their career. And I saw that there was a lot that was done about, we're going to get juniors in and we're going to get people and we're going to do reverse mentoring and all this stuff. But actually what was missing was sponsorship at the top. So sponsorship from the heads of the marketing directors, the C-suite, etc., to actually help people through an organisation. Because it's one thing to get in, but then when you're in, if you're from a different background, then you can't join chats about skiing in January and stuff like that. And even harder if you're from a minority group like myself, being a Brummie. So that's why we started that, and people like Natalie and Aisha are involved in it, and that's what we're working to do. So to help keep people at the mid-level in their career. Yes, we're going to do stuff at the lower level as well, but it's more about sponsorship and the midpoint.
Thank you for that. And you're also one of the campaign's 40 over 40. You don't look 40.
It's a Lifetime Achievement Award. Yeah. I was prouder when I started out and got Faces to Watch as a 25-year-old. And then when you get to 40 and you get that award, you don't, shall I post this? No.
So Nick, let's talk about, because this panel is obviously the current landscape of ED&I in the UK. There is a lot of noise around ED&I, tick boxing, and obviously some brands even doing a U-turn on this whole thing around equality, diversity, inclusion. So let's talk about the first of the progress. What specific actions can agency and brands take to support black and talent of colour in the industry, especially at the leadership level?
At the leadership level, so I actually was against this at the start, this idea of having targets. But actually, Oliver, our founder Simon Martin, was a believer in it, and we had this debate around the time of George Floyd as to whether we should or we shouldn't. But he actually set global targets across all of our markets, and we have targets for kind of black and brown employees. We have targets around women, around LGBT, around neurodiversity, disability, etc. And having the targets really helps because, you know, it's a cliche, but in a business, what gets measured gets done, and it keeps it kind of top of mind. So I think that actually helps, quantifying your goal and setting a target. We also, around that time, introduced something called the Change Board within Oliver. So we have our kind of global leadership team, and then we had a shadow board of change makers. So we got across the organisation everyone that's interested in this subject as change makers, and then we had above that a change board, so select representatives, and they were invited every quarter to the global leadership team meeting, and they held their job is to hold the global leadership team to account in terms of targets. We actually paid people extra as well to be on this board, because very often, especially as a black employee, like you've got to do your job, do really well, and then everybody's looking to you to solve this problem. So it's not really my problem to solve. So I'm often advising kind of minority talent, try not to get yourself too sucked into this to the detriment of your career. I mean, I'd rather you just push ahead in your job, get to a good position, and then you can actually make tangible changes. So in my position, I'm able to look at my strategy team and build a really diverse team. I'm able to influence the culture within the company. So that's much more powerful than me trying to lobby others, kind of just being in the seat. So I tell people, be a bit selfish, but it's for the greater good, actually.
And in your opinion, what can we do to empower those younger, maybe not so career hungry yet professionals, but how can we get them so they are more eager to step up, so they can be also then supported in becoming managers, becoming those change makers?
Well, actually, if you look at Lydia Amoa and her Black Pound report, I think that the last edition was 2022, she actually found in that study that kind of minority employees are more ambitious and actually much more hungry to push into the management level. So I don't think the issue is how do we do more to motivate them. The issue is how do we actually persuade people to trust in those roles. Like if you are in an agency and you're in a client-facing role, then there may be a tendency to, oh my God, I don't know if I want to put this black guy, this Asian woman in front of the client, because what will they think? And you don't look the part. That there is a perceived image.
And do you think that is still happening in today's day and age?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And the fear is, we've got a bias as humans to hire in our image, and also make decisions that have always been done. So people have to work against that.
And how can we change that? Because we're here all about learning how can we do things differently. What do you do differently at Oliver, or what would be your tip that potentially could make that whoever is in the room today can go back to the teams and say, this is what we need to do. This is the one thing I want to implement as a result of attending ED&I today.
It's an interesting question, which I'm not sure I have the total answer to, if I'm honest. I don't have all the answers to everything. When I started my career at an agency called Harrison, Troughton, Wunderman, which is now Wunderman, which is now WT, which is now VML, just to keep up with all the agency acronyms. It was a really strong creative culture, and they were looking for people who were curious, people who liked to read, people who liked to travel. And what struck me was in that culture, I won't say colourblind, because I don't believe in this idea of colourblind and ignoring people, but actually the culture and the type of people they were looking for outweighed, like the differences of, we want someone who's been to private school, and we want someone who talks like this. Actually, we want someone who's really creative, someone who's really interesting. And in any agency, the colour that matters most is black and red. And so if you are in an agency and you're able to generate revenue, that does also massively work in your favour, I have found.
Okay. Let's just dive into their industry. You're obviously working with a lot of big brands out there. So I'm just curious, how are brands adopting to this increased diversity, and what challenges do they face in authentically connecting with the diverse audiences?
I think one of the biggest challenges is that if you are a major brand, you are not necessarily looking at doing niche things or targeting of specific audiences. You want to go broad.
Yep.
You know, you want to reach the widest audience, and so the plans and the thinking is not really geared or designed for ED&I or targeting of that group. And if you want to get it on the plan or on the agenda, you have to push really hard, because the whole way the companies are structured and the way that campaigns are planned and media is bought just doesn't often allow breathing space for it. So what I have found is you will have strategies that will be developed, but then it's just never really implemented. Or to get something off the ground, you might get carved out a little bit of spend over here, but you have to get a really bloody nose to make it happen. And then marketeers like shiny new things, and unfortunately this kind of set of 3 letters is not the shiny new thing at the moment. The shiny new thing is Gen AI. So my tip or my piece of advice is to look at how can you marry your ED&I efforts within the AI agenda. So in conversations now with Oliver, we're talking about things like bias breaker tool that we've built, which helps when you're looking at campaigns and imagery. And when you switch on the bias breaker, if you put, I want a CEO, if you put that into something like a Mid-Journey or a Adobe Firefly or whatever, you'll get an image of a white guy, grey hair, certain age. When we put it through our bias breaker tool, it works like a roll of the dice against some various criteria. So you may actually get a Muslim woman as your CEO, or somebody who's in a wheelchair, or etc. So leveraging those kind of tools to make this topic relevant to the things that are on the CEO's and CMO's agenda right now. Because actually there's, I will shut up if you want, but
No,
okay.
No, you carry on.
Okay, actually if you look at it, this subject is pretty much in decline. Across America, there has been a big drive against the anti-woke movement, and there are actual activists to get brands like Disney to not focus on ED&I. And there are brands that as soon as they get this kind of activism, they kind of change. So it's fallen off the radar from the States. As well as in the UK, same things happened. It's really hard. When you look at things like the riots over the summer, then brands go, should we even bother? When brands put out a social media post, don't know if you've ever looked at the posts when there's got a kind of black or brown face on, and then you actually get people putting this like tick to accuse brands of doing the tick box exercise. It's actually quite depressing to read the comments, but I'm strangely drawn to it. So it's like that. But there was an article in the FT about a month ago, and that was talking about the fact that why D&I is an economic imperative. And this article's talking about the reframing of D&I and saying that we should actually use the language of it being a demographic and economic imperative. So I'd kind of give you a tip. It's worth looking at that article, reading it, and perhaps sharing it with your CMOs and kind of the C-suite within your organisation.
There is a lot of that movement also in the big tech. Google, Vodafone, other companies are sort of looking at changing how they're looking and portraying ED&I. Do you think this is just a topic that is going to be swept under the carpet, and something else is now, like you said, AI is coming in, therefore we need to move on? Or do you think this is one of those things that we haven't sorted it yet, but something else came on and it's topical and we need to be jumping on that, but still working on this in the background, but we also need to do this because our competition is doing this. This is less important now.
Yeah, it's less important in the minds of business. Obviously, it's not less important generally.
Absolutely.
I think the reason it gets ignored is also because it's just really hard. And businesses like to pick things that they can succeed at. So we're not going to touch that one because we can't actually do it. And if I don't do it, I may not get my bonus, and I may not hit my numbers. So let's ignore that and pick easier things, easier levers, and also levers where you don't have to confront the truth about yourself. So race is such a powerful and kind of evocative subject that it's easier to just ignore it than confront our own biases.
So let's continue with that. What practical steps should brands take to ensure long-term success in ED&I then?
It starts with the kind of building out of your own team, like rather than, yes, you can hire in experts and all that kind of jazz, but actually you've got to actively build a diverse team and have the right voices in the room when your work is being developed. For example, if you look at the last week, poor old Heinz have had a rough time, haven't they, with 2 ads effectively being pulled because they weren't appropriate. And I just think if they had the right people working, the right people firstly buying that work, because we always talk about, oh, we've got to have the right people creating it, but actually I think you've got to have the right people buying it to kind of scrutinise the agencies, and then you've got to have the right partners to work with. So that Heinz example, they worked with VML in Spain on the ad with the black lady who doesn't have a father present in the ad. And I thought, yeah, well, it doesn't surprise me that that's come from kind of Spain, where they have much less awareness and understanding of a black culture. And then the other example is New York, really good agency actually, but I guess they probably didn't have a diverse creative team or account team or strategy team. And then on the global brand side, global brands are, the bigger the brand, the more disconnected from the real world they are. Like, global brand people live in another world, not our world. They're in the world of expensive hotels. They fly from the East Coast to the West Coast of America and look down on everybody else, and they fly into London for meetings, and they're just not connected to real people. And I think that's beyond just racial differences, but it's also about class differences. It's also about understanding, you know, what does a mum who's got like, we're raising a couple of kids on her own, what's she really thinking about and caring about? Do you even understand? Because when you start to earn a certain amount of money, you just lose touch with reality. I think that's one of the biggest challenges for those big organisations, to stay in touch with the real world and not in the marketing ivory tower of what you think is important.
Thank you so much for that. We've covered a lot, and unfortunately there's a lot more we would like to talk about. Unfortunately, we're out of time now, but I would like to encourage everybody to obviously reflect and think about one action that you will take to ensure that your marketing reflects the diverse audience that is surrounding you, not just on a day-to-day basis, but also among your customers. We will now have a very short 5 to 10 minute break before the next panel. And I would like each one of the tables, like I've mentioned, to nominate a spokesperson. If it's easier by default to refer to one of our GottaBe colleagues, that's absolutely fine. And I would like you to think about and share your reason for joining today. What is it that made you to come today? What was it that got you here first thing in the morning? And when we come back onto the panel 2, Martin will go around the tables and ask each one of you just to get an idea. And of course, please continue to use the hashtag Everyone Doing Together to continue sharing your thoughts and learnings from today. So thank you so much, Nick, for coming and joining me.